Hello YouTube, Bane666 here. So anyway, last week the Red Pill movie by Cassie J was released on DVD and Blu-ray, and you can actually rent it online and watch it online if you want, which is what I did last week. It's a very interesting movie. There really wasn't much, if anything, new in it from my perspective, but I think it's a great movie for people who are unaware of men's issues. And it's good to see that these issues are now being talked about in a mainstream kind of way, in a way that the mainstream can access it a lot easier. And I have to give Cassie J full credit. But I thought it'd be interesting to make a video about two videos I've seen from feminists who are talking about the Red Pill movie and the men's rights movement, who obviously have, first of all, not seen the movie, and second of all, have absolutely no idea what they're talking about when they talk about the men's rights movement. Now, the first one we're going to start with is clearly the worst of the two. It's something I only saw this morning and was amazed at the level of sheer stupidity and ignorance from this gender studies professor. I mean, I shouldn't be. But one claim in particular she makes is just so fucking offensive and ignorant. And I have to wonder if it is ignorance or whether it's she's lying through her teeth. But we'll get to that in a minute. So the background is a Canadian conservative politician tweeted out a meme on Twitter which said, "Take the red pill, vote Mad Max." His name's Max. And this has now somehow been tied into the men's rights movement and the fact that the Red Pill movie was going to be shown at a university campus in Canada, which once again caused controversy. So the CBC decided to get on a gender studies professor to talk about the red pill and men's rights. I mean, what could go wrong with that, right? I'm sure a gender studies professor is the perfect person to talk to, as opposed to, an actual men's rights activist. So I think the best thing to do is just to jump into the clip and listen to the insanity and dissect it bit by bit.
At the center of this controversy is the film The Red Pill. For a look at the film and the culture of men's rights activism it deals with, we've asked Rebecca Sullivan to join us. She's a professor of women's studies at the University of Calgary.
Now, I find who they asked on to be very, very interesting, because people have made the accusation towards the Red Pill movie, people who have not seen the Red Pill, by the way, have made the accusation that it is biased and one-sided, which I find incredible, because Cassie J goes out of her way to present the feminist perspective as well. So a movie which presents the men's rights perspective as well as the feminist perspective, each in their own words, is somehow classed as biased because it's not anti-MRA. That's the logic. Yet shows like this continuously talk about the men's rights movement and don't get a representative from the men's rights movement on to defend it. They just have a feminist or a gender study professor or whatever. And if by chance they do happen to get an MRA on, usually the MRA is outnumbered 2-1. And if they don't have two feminists for every MRA, then it's one feminist and the host who is sympathetic towards feminists. It's never one men's rights activist and an open-minded host. Not that I've seen anyway. There might be one example out there somewhere, but I honestly can't think of one. So I'm sure this is going to be not only well researched, but absolutely fair and accurate in every single way, and isn't in any way biased and a propaganda piece. No, that definitely not that, right? And remember, folks, that it's these same feminists who claim that we're the establishment and they're the downtrodden underclass who doesn't have a voice.
So let's start with the controversy, if we can. Did you ever imagine that you would see the words "feminism is cancer" at an event that's happening at your workplace?
So a little bit of background here. Apparently someone from the Wild Rose Party, which is apparently a conservative party in Canada, sent out a tweet saying that feminism is cancer. And the group later apologised, and the person responsible stepped down from their position.
It was frightening. I won't deny that. It was sickening to wake up in the morning. I know it broke last night, but I made the mistake of staying off Twitter for a whole hour. And I wake up in the morning getting ready for work, and this is what I see. This is scary. And I think we have to name it as scary. I think we've been turning a blind eye, making excuses, calling it, underground, or, a minor extremist movement, or, pathetic. Yeah, it is pathetic, but it's also dangerous and really, really scary.
Just a couple of things to point out here. It's clear that she's talking about the men's rights group here when she's talking about an underground group. The group that sent out the tweet about feminism being cancer was not a men's rights group, so she's associating the two together. Now, it is true that they were organising to show the red pill on campus, yet I still have to point out that the men's rights movement is not responsible for anything the Wild Rose group says or does. But it seems in her mind that they're somehow exactly the same group. I guess because they're not feminists. I guess everyone who's not a feminist is all part of the same big group, right? That's how it works, isn't it? You're either with us or against us. The other thing is she refers to us as being pathetic, which I found interesting, considering later on she actually names quite a few men's rights issues that we talk about. Yet somehow we're pathetic. But we'll get more into that a bit later. That's the really juicy part of this video. Let's get back to it.
So the term red pill didn't actually originate with men's rights
No.
community at all. Can you tell us where it came from and basically what it means now, how it's evolved?
Yeah, and I think, people have to kind of bear with me as I explain this because it doesn't really make a lot of sense. It's fundamentally a bad metaphor. But the red pill, of course, comes from the film The Matrix.
I'm guessing she hasn't seen The Matrix either. That's another movie we can add to the list that she's willing to talk about that she hasn't seen. I mean, listen to what she says next.
You can take the blue pill and go about your merry way, or you can take the red pill and enter the Matrix.
Oh, you can take the red pill and enter the Matrix. Now, to be fair, it might have just been a slip of the tongue. But considering she gets everything else wrong in this video, I have to wonder whether she's actually seen The Matrix and whether she actually understands what the metaphor means. I suspect she doesn't. Considering she got it completely wrong here. I mean, just a little thing. It's just a tiny thing. Just the complete opposite of what it is. That's all. But let's continue.
Well, then a group on Reddit were discussing not just men's rights but also the pickup artist movement and how women kind of owe them sex.
Yeah, this is kind of standard operating procedure for this type of feminist, isn't it? You can't actually address anything said or done by actual MRAs, so what you do is you bring up the pickup artists and you make allegations about MRAs just wanting sex, and then you throw the red pill Reddit in there just as, just as that bonus fucking straw man. Standard fucking operating procedure right here. It's incredibly fucking frustrating dealing with this shit over and over again. Needless to say, there are no men's rights activists going around claiming that women owing them sex is a men's rights issue. Okay? None. Fucking zero. Now, if you want to argue against the pickup artists and claim that they're talking about that, you go right ahead and do it. Don't associate it with us, though, right? I mean, look at the fucking name of the article. It says men's rights, not pick up. And the Red Pill Reddit has nothing to do with the men's rights movement. Apart from the fact that we share a metaphor, that's it. And I would argue that we don't use the metaphor in exactly the same way. Now, I will explain what the Red Pill metaphor means. It simply means waking up and seeing reality different than what you previously thought it was. The social justice community has a similar metaphor or saying, which has recently come into popular use by them, and that's to be woke, right? If you're woke, then you're looking at things, you've become aware of things and the way they really are. That's all the red pill is. Now, from a men's rights perspective, being red-pilled, you really can't have a better example than the journey Cassie J goes on in the Red Pill movie. And she would know this if she bothered watching the movie. But of course, that would be too much hassle, wouldn't it? It's much better to judge something you haven't seen than actually watch it and look at it with an open mind. But Cassie J starts out as a feminist. She listens to men's perspective and looks at the issues and looks at the stats and data behind those issues. These contradict her worldview, the way she sees reality, because she's always seen men as privileged and women as downtrodden, and now men are presenting real fucking issues which are backed up by real statistics and evidence. And it takes her time to come to terms with this and to accept that the way she saw the world was incorrect, right? This is her taking the red pill. She goes through a process. Often she breaks down in tears while making the movie because it's so confronting for her. And eventually she abandons her previous worldview and adopts a new one based on new fucking information. This is no different than someone being raised a Christian, for example, and then once being shown enough evidence and information, going through a process which eventually leads them to becoming an atheist. I mean, I can give you lots of examples of this. Let's go back to the 60s with the feminist movement, right? When women realised that they didn't have to be stay-at-home mothers and housewives and that they could have a career and they didn't have to be restricted by the same gender roles. That realisation is simply taking the fucking red pill. That's all it is. It's not men demanding to rape women or some such bullshit. But let's continue.
And so the criticism is that the blue pill is the women, saying that they want to be treated with respect and they want equality.
No. From an MRA perspective, what the blue pill is the ideology that only women have issues or only women's issues count. In other words, men's issues are invisible or non-existent. That's the blue pill.
The red pill is a metaphor for what women really want. The real world,
which is not equality, apparently. Okay.
Is domination and subjugation. That's what women really want.
Oh boy. Now look, I don't use the Red Pill Reddit, and I'm not a pickup artist, so there may be people in those communities who think something like that. But that's not part of the men's rights movement. And if you actually watch the Red Pill movie, once again, it helps if you watch something before you criticize it. I know it's crazy, right? It's crazy to actually want to watch something before you judge it. I mean, it's just insane. But if you actually watch the Red Pill movie, it makes it clear that we don't diminish women's issues, or we don't claim that women don't have issues. We accept that women have issues. All we're saying is that men have issues too. And society loves to ignore those issues. It fucking loves to pretend they don't exist. And realizing that they do exist is taking the red pill. It's got nothing to do with getting laid or taking away the rights of women. But, why let the truth get in the way of a good feminist argument, right? And remember, this is supposed to be their expert.
Okay. Well, the film has generated a lot of controversy. Do you think us even sitting here talking about it actually gives it some undue attention, normalizes some of its arguments?
I'm certainly afraid of that. And I think that we do have to be mindful of that. And maybe a year or two I would have said, yeah, I'm not talking about it. Let's not give it any attention. But here's the thing. It has been mainstreamed now.
Oh, no. No. Not a movie that actually talks about men's issues going mainstream. That's terrible. How dare they talk about their issues? Clearly a movie about the men's rights movement should be talking about women's issues, damn it. Because, you know, we never talk about women's issues, ever, in the mainstream. It never happens. It's never happened in the history of mankind. We've never talked about a woman's issue. Not once. Clearly we live in a patriarchy. I don't know what other proof that you need that we live in a patriarchy.
Now, people are talking about it. We have a leadership candidate for the Conservative Party of Canada tweeting out to an elected politician with Wild Rose, Maxime Bernier and Derek Fildebrandt, tweeting out red pill memes.
Wait.
Okay, I don't know the politicians involved. Apparently the Conservative Canadian politicians. Apart from that, I really don't know anything about them. To my knowledge, they're not associated with the men's rights movement. It sounds like they're critical of feminism, though. But that's not the only requirement you have to be an MRA. In fact, it's not even a requirement to be an MRA, although most MRAs tend to be anti-feminist. But I should point out that the politician in question did state that he was only referring to the Matrix movie and to nothing else. I don't know if that's true or not, but as previously stated, the red pill metaphor is not only used by MRAs.
Right?
In your
it's a wink.
Interpretation.
Yeah, it's a wink. And we know it's a wink because what do we have? We have the Wild Rose on campus and the Conservative Party of Canada on campus jointly hosting this film. It has been mainstreamed. And what this culture relies on is the naivete of decent Canadians, of saying there's no way people really believe this. There's no way people are really acting upon this. And certainly there could be no way that they are infiltrating our respected political parties in Canada.
So let's cut through that naivete then and tell me about what the film is and what people it portrays. What do they stand for?
They stand for the right of men to have mostly sexual rights. It's the right of men to engage in any sexual activity that they want and, you know, have entitlement to women's bodies.
Oh, boy. Oh, you know, the funny thing is, there's nothing, absolutely nothing like that in the Red Pill movie. Not a fucking thing. At no point does anyone state anything which could in any way be interpreted like that. The closest I think you would come to it in the Red Pill movie is talking about fathers' rights, which is still nowhere near what she's talking about. But, you know, obviously if you're a father, you've had sex at some point. That's as close as it gets. That's it. It does, however, talk about circumcision, which is, you know, a right for men to have autonomy over their own bodies. But at no point does it claim in any fucking way that men should have the right to have sex with women whenever they want. It's ludicrous to suggest such a thing. It's fucking insane is what it is. And the fact that they get this gender studies professor, a fucking professor, on this show as their expert to talk about this, it's fucking disgusting. And it actually gets worse later on.
The men's rights movement points to a number of very real issues in our society, that there are very few resources available to men who experience domestic or gender or sexual violence. to the fact that suicide rates are very high for men, incarceration culture, high dropout rates, lowering participation in post-secondary education. These are all very real and pressing and urgent issues.
Now, before going on to the next bit, which is the really interesting bit of this video, I just want to go off on a little bit of a tangent and talk about what she just said. Because it's fairly common for people who should be our allies to actually talk down the men's rights movement. And I've read and heard people say that we've been a failure. I have to say this is absolute fucking bullshit. And what you just saw with this feminist professor is the perfect example of that. She just read out a whole list of men's rights issues, and she acknowledged that they're real fucking issues that need to be dealt with. Feminists weren't doing this 4 or 5 years ago, but now they're being put in a position whenever they want to shit all over us, they have to talk about our issues and acknowledge that they're actual issues, so they don't come off as narrow-minded bigots, which, for the record, is exactly what they are. You know, just 4 years ago we were being told that men don't have issues. Men's issues don't exist. Or men's issues are so unimportant that we'll deal with them once we've dealt with all the women's issues, including the whole air conditioning being sexist thing. We'll deal with that before we deal with male circumcision and the high male suicide rate and the rest of it, because men's issues just don't count. So in 5 years, a grassroots movement which is outnumbered, outgunned and outfinanced by its opposition, which is massive. This is a David and Goliath situation, no doubt. That grassroots movement in 5 years has shifted the conversation to the point where our opposition is acknowledging our issues, publicly talking about our issues. How the fuck can you say that we're a failure? Now, I'm not saying the battle is over. We have a long way to go. We are just getting started here. Most people don't even know about our issues yet, but this takes time. I mean, when the LGBT movement start talking about gay marriage, do you think everything changed in fucking 2 weeks? You think everyone just said, hey, that's a great idea, we should just make that legal? Of course not. It took decades and decades and decades of hard work. It took spreading awareness, and it took public opinion to slowly change over time. Once that happened, it reached a tipping point, and then things changed. That's what will happen here, over time. And it disappoints me that some people tend to talk us down this way. And it makes me think that maybe they're a little bit more gynocentric than they should be. Maybe they just haven't taken enough of that red pill yet, right? But let's go back to the crazy feminist professor. And boy, is she about to fucking go off the deep end. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to play the clip I just played you again, so everything's in proper context. And because it goes from talking about men's issues into a very, very strange place, which you really have to listen to believe. Anyway, let's listen to that bit again.
The men's rights movement points to a number of very real issues in our society, that there are very few resources available to men who experience domestic or gender or sexual violence, to the fact that suicide rates are very high for men, incarceration culture, high dropout rates, lowering participation in post-secondary education. These are all very real and pressing and urgent issues. But they go from there immediately to, it's women's fault.
Yeah, the funny thing is, if you actually watch the Red Pill movie, once again, I know it's crazy, watching a movie before you comment on it. I know, it's insane. But if you actually watch the movie, it clearly states that that's not the case, that we don't blame women, and that these issues aren't even the fault of feminists, although feminists are the ones who routinely stand in our way. For example, this interview. Perfect fucking example of why we're anti-feminists. Because of this bullshit. But the really, really bad bit's just around the corner. If you're holding a coffee cup or something, you might want to put it down for this. I'm thinking of your monitors, okay? Trust me.
Because they are denying men their natural rights as men. Meaning, if only we could just have sex with whoever and whatever we want, whenever we want, then maybe we wouldn't have to rape you.
And there it is. You're going to have to forgive me, folks. I'm going to have to take a minute to really let that sink in and try to work out the logic behind this, because it's really difficult to kind of work out. She says that men have legitimate issues like male suicide, for example, and then we blame all these issues on women, which isn't true. But okay, let's go with that just to follow her logic. And then what we think is the solution to this is to be able to have sex with women whenever we want, so we don't have to rape them. Yeah, I guess that would be the perfect solution to male circumcision, right? Male infant circumcision. If we could just rape women whenever we wanted, there wouldn't be any male circumcision anymore, right? Maybe the sentencing gap would just disappear as well. It's astounding, really. It's almost like she just read off a whole heap of men's issues so she wouldn't be accused of being a narrow-minded bigot, and then followed it up with a baseless allegation to try to make us sound like monsters. Like a dishonest cunt would, right? Someone producing propaganda. Now, remember she said she was terrified earlier because someone had sent out a tweet saying that feminism is cancer. Yet apparently it's okay to suggest that men's rights activists want to go around having the right to rape women. Apparently that's okay, right? Apparently that's not as bad as suggesting feminism is cancer. Yeah, I think this particular feminist is, without a doubt, fucking cancer. And the fact that they allow this type of bullshit on the Canadian national broadcaster, and it's unchallenged. Could you imagine if a man, like a male professor, went on the national broadcaster or any mainstream TV show and said this type of shit about women? Could you imagine what the reaction would be? He would lose his job overnight. The broadcaster would be apologising. And whoever booked him to go on the show would lose their job too. But remember, folks, we live in a patriarchy, right? Which only looks after men and doesn't give women a voice. It's just absolutely fucking astounding, the level of bullshit.
Well, I guess that is exactly why it's controversial.
Exactly why it's controversial.
And, we thank you very much for coming in and explaining this, because it has been a bit of a cloudy issue for many. So,
and that's what they're banking on. As I said, they're banking on decent Canadians not understanding what they're saying.
Oh.
And
do I really need to explain the irony of that statement? Her whole fucking lie is based on people not knowing enough and not understanding enough about the men's rights movement, that she can get away with this bullshit unchallenged.
we need to understand what is being said.
Rebecca Sullivan, thank you for helping us do that.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you.
One in 3 American women
and equal rights for women in the United
have been found guilty of raping a West Virginia teenager. misogynist rantings would be at home in the far-reaching internet subculture widely described as the men's rights movement.
Declaring the month of October to be Bash a Violent Month.
I decided to go where no feminist has gone before and meet these men's rights activists.
Men and boys are in crisis and they need your support because they are human beings too. And you will not shame anybody here into silence about it anymore.
Every society survived based on its ability to train its sons to be disposable.
The U.S. government does not want to send you to die. It would rather send me to die.
93% of workplace fatalities are men. 4 of 5 suicides.
The family court system truly is biased against men. I mean, there's just no question about it.
How can anybody not be angered by it? But if you start to talk about those issues, people get hostile.
You are f***ing scum.
We're somehow disempowered because we're white men. Maybe it's just because you're pathetic.
The paradigm that most people live by. Men have all the power, women don't make the same money for the same work. That is feminist training.
Flexibility in roles is where we should be all headed.
So where do the men's movement and feminism disagree?
Is the men's rights movement the gender version of the white nationalist movement?
The men's rights movement is part of the backlash. Grandfather's generation probably had it pretty well, you know, grow up.
She told her friend she's going to trick me into fathering the child.
I called a bunch of domestic violence shelters. Every place said, we don't help men.
When I reported my domestic assault, I did not bring up the fact that I was sexually assaulted. There was no way he was going to believe that I was going to be a victim of sexual assault.
All the evils of the world's from patriarchy, but we're the ones dying, and we die for you guys.
I don't know where I'm headed, what I believe.
This is not flattering to men to talk about men's vulnerabilities.
We're not blaming men. We just named everything bad after them.
I think I agree with everything you said, but there's still some kind of unsettling doubt.
Because they are denying men their natural rights as men, meaning if only we could just have sex with whoever and whatever we want, whenever we want, then maybe we wouldn't have to rape you.